By Robin Brown lifts the veil off one of history's most polarizing figures. Up to now, not a lot was known other than the obvious that he made a fortune from diamonds and gold, became Prime Minister of the Cape and had a country named after him. Author Robin Brown joins me now in studio to share his insights. Robin, thank you very much for joining me on Morning Live.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the obvious, because obviously when you started putting this book together, there was a perception of Cecil John Rhodes, and in this book you blow a lot of theories out of the water. He was a very complex character.
He was an extremely complex character. I mean, I started the book 7 years ago. I was given a copy of Lewis Mitchell's Life of John Rhodes, which was the first autobiography. In it, it had two interesting things. The rest of it was as boring as any book could be. But it had two interesting things. First of all, that Rhodes worked from original papers. And secondly, that he reported that Rhodes lived by the rules of his secret society until he died. Because initially, the secret society was dismissed as a kind of infantile fantasy. But Rhodes was still following the principles when he died.
Talking about the creation of the secret society, there's a determination, and you start very early off talking about he was a relentless character. There was something about his character that he would never stop. He always had this drive, whether it was the various businesses, whether it was the various networks that he set up, how he was able to place people around him that strategically could advance him forward. From the letters, the interactions that you've been able to see, what kind of character was Rhodes?
Well, he was very driven, but he was also very devious. He invented different characters. I mean, the most classic one was Rhodes carried around in his pocket the meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And when he was in Kimberley, in the early days, I mean, he got there when he was 19, he was always seen brooding, and he got the reputation of a great swot. So he goes to Oxford, age 20, paying for it himself because he's made enough money out of the diamond mines. Goes to Oxford. What does he do? Nothing. He becomes a complete playboy. He goes drinking at the Bullingdon Club. He dresses in Oxford bags. He has a little pouch of diamonds.
With diamonds, yeah.
Which he shows and boasts with to all his pals. Hardly gets a decent degree of awe, was very nearly kicked out for not going to enough lectures and going to the races. So here's this number 2 Rhodes, and there's already been a couple already.
What is it about this character? Because when you read it, you can't believe it. You can't believe, one of the things you talk about is homosexuality and his kind of first introduction to it, going back to England and being introduced, and this idea that you needed to have a wife with children, but that it was ring-fenced around wealth. He was just an oddball character. He was an ice cream maker. We talk about the agricultural machines that he bought, that he won the tenders for to save the two rivers. And under all of those things, though, there was just a guy with this idea that he could influence people, influence an idea, influence a society, but he was almost Captain Jack Sparrow in many ways.
Oh yes, no, exactly. If I may, I'll get rid of this business about homosexuality straight away, because all the papers have picked up on that.
Yeah, because everybody wants to talk about it.
Yeah. But the truth of the matter is that homosexuality with Rhodes was probably the least kept secret of all. And we've always known, anybody who's known anything about Rhodes has known that he was gay. All right, let's say it, let's face it, and then we can put it down in history. But he was also adventurously gay. And he actually obviously had quite a good time being gay, because he always used to take either one of his angels or his lambs, as they were known as, to England, and he took them all to the big parties. There were these young South African lads, really not raised in anything, and there was this one famous occasion which I remember, where he took him to the party. The Lord came up to Rhodes and said, "Why do you bring these young louts here? This one's just about broken my hand," when he shook it. And Rhodes looked at the guy and he said, "Yeah, but you haven't seen how he handles mules."
One of the other things I wanted to ask you is, was he a racist?
you've got to judge people in their time. And I mean, you will find lots of references which would indicate that Rhodes was a racist. But in his time, he was known as a nigger lover, believe it or not. Also as a Boer lover, both of which were kind of completely anti what they thought about in England. And there is this one famous piece of paper, which I think actually sums it up, where Rhodes was asked, what was a civilized man? And his answer was, it's a man with enough education to be able to write his name, who has some property, and who is not a loafer. Now, it's interesting with the word loafer because he also extracted anybody who was a loafer from his own family will, and actually included the army in that.
He's a polarizing figure in South Africa because we recently had the Rhodes Must Fall statue at the UCT and at Rhodes University, and we've seen just so many young people look back at our history and how we interpret history. That influence now, if you look at it, just maybe today, if you had to articulate it today, Rhodes' influence in still modern society.
I've got a very ambivalent answer on that one. I mean, I think it is a good thing that Rhodes has an influence on modern society because so much of South Africa pivoted round Rhodes in the early days. I have a personal ambivalence about statues. I think they're all a bit grandiose and triumphant, and it might well be a better idea to put them all in a grand hall of statues. But what you can't do is pull down the history with the statue. You're always going to have people like me coming along and go, dig, 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 and there'll be more history at the end of it than there was to start it.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you very much for joining me. That was the Secret Society, Cecil John Rhodes Plan for New World Order author Robin Brown, talking to us about probably one of the most polarizing figures in African history, Cecil John Rhodes.